He said, "It wasn't cheating, just a swapping party. It's a coincidence your sister was there." When I got home, I found his credit card bill and a smashed locket a note saying, "Tomorrow, your and your little girlfriend's lives will change forever." The next day, something terrible happened. Gosh, how did he get caught? Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It all started on a New Year's Eve that felt like any other, but ended up being the beginning of the end of my life as I knew it. The cheap party horns blared around me, a sound that was supposed to be joyful but just grated on my nerves. Diane, my husband's best friend, let out a loud shriek of laughter, pulling my attention to some commotion on the makeshift dance floor. I couldn't understand her excitement. Her constant, buzzing energy was starting to feel like a mosquito in a quiet room. Around us, people were clinking glasses, their voices buzzing with talk of New Year's resolutions. I started considering one for myself. Maybe it was time to put some distance between me and Diane. That felt like a good, solid goal for the year ahead. It had become a quiet tradition for me to spend New Year's Eve in a state of mourning for my past mistakes, especially the ones I'd inflicted upon myself. My life, once so full of passion, had been ravaged by a kind of obsession, much like a gambler who recklessly loses everything at the table. So there we were, my husband Walter and I, caught in our own separate worlds while others celebrated the passing year. This party had been his idea. He was over by the bar, holding court with a group of his colleagues, his laugh booming across the room. He looked happy. He looked like the man I married. But when his eyes met mine for a fleeting second, there was no connection. Just a polite, distant smile. While everyone else laughed, danced, and enjoyed themselves, I sat on the sidelines, and no one seemed interested in joining me. Instead, people whispered and pointed, assuming I wouldn't notice their judgmental glances. This was our small Michigan town's big New Year's Eve party, and there had been a time when I would have loved it. I would have been out there, wearing a silly hat and clinging to Walter as if he were my lifeline. Those nights used to end with us tangled in each other's arms. Both of our kids, Sarah and Ben, were conceived after New Year's Eve parties. Sarah was conceived right in our living room, unable to make it upstairs before Walter tore off my dress with a playful ferocity I missed so much. Ben came 2 years later, outside the party hall, when Walter pushed me against a cold brick wall, taking me with an intensity that still made me ache for those days. The memory made me sigh, a small, sad sound that was lost in the noise of the party. I shifted my gaze across the room and spotted him again. My mind drifted back to the first time I saw Walter, at his company's Christmas party. He was 25, a shy new engineer, awkwardly navigating the event. I was working as a server, not supposed to interact with the guests, but I couldn't resist him. He had this earnest, clumsy charm. Despite the rule against fraternizing with clients, I found a way. By the end of the night, I slipped him a beer with a smile and a napkin where I had secretly written my name and number. Clueless as ever, he didn't notice until later, loudly announcing his excitement, which drew the attention of everyone in the room. I played it cool, continuing my work, but even my supervisor smiled, amused by his pure enthusiasm. Within a week, we were dating. A month later, we were officially together, and within a year, we were married. Every moment with him felt perfect. I often told people, Walter was made for me. He was a devoted husband and a loving father, and I was sure we'd never be apart. Our life together was happy. We bought our dream house in a wonderful neighborhood, surrounded by great neighbors. It was a perfect place for our kids to grow up, and as time went on, my love for Walter only deepened. Or so I believed. Looking at him now, laughing with Diane, a stranger in a familiar suit, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. Life's surprises often hit you when you're doing something completely mundane. For me, it wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It started with the flu. About 2 years ago, right before Christmas, Walter caught a nasty flu. He was completely knocked out. Being the devoted wife I was, I took a few days off from my part-time job at the library to stay home and care for him. By then, our kids were out of the house. Sarah was married and living in an apartment downtown, while Ben was away at college. Walter, a high school principal, had likely caught the virus there. During his illness, he lost his appetite and mostly just wanted me to sit by his side, holding his hand. It felt like the old days, just the two of us. I'd bring him soup, check his temperature, and we'd watch old movies on TV. It was quiet. Peaceful. One day, he was craving fresh fruit, so I decided to run to the market. It was a crisp, cold morning. I was in the produce section, trying to decide between oranges and grapefruit, when I literally bumped carts with Stanley Clark. I hadn't seen him or his wife, Brenda, in months. Stanley was a quiet man, always seemed a bit lost in his own world. He never really caught my eye before, but that morning, I noticed the dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired. Worn out. "Oh, Lorraine, I'm so sorry," he said, pulling our shopping carts apart. "It's okay, Stanley," I replied with a small smile. "How are you doing?" He just looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that made no sense at all. "I know what you're going through." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "It may not seem like it now," he continued, his voice low and serious, "but it does get better. You just need to give yourself time to realize you didn't do anything wrong. Hang in there. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who understands, just call me." He walked away, leaving me standing there by the avocados, completely and utterly confused. What the hell did he mean? What was I going through, other than a husband with the flu? My friend Sheila, who seemed to materialize whenever there was gossip, was suddenly behind me. "Holy crap," she whispered. "In nearly a year, I've never seen that man talk to anyone. What did you say to him?" "I didn't say anything," I replied, my mind still reeling. "He did all the talking." "Sheila, do you have any idea why he and Brenda split up?" "Not a clue," she said, leaning closer. "They kept everything under wraps. They even saw an out-of-town divorce lawyer. She got the house, but I guess that's usually how these things go. If you hear anything, let me know, okay?" The conversation with Stanley stayed on my mind all the way home. It made no sense. He was so quiet, and Brenda, well, Brenda was the opposite. She was vivacious, always the life of the party. I couldn't understand why they would divorce. When I got home, Walter was still asleep, so I sat beside him, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Stanley. As I mulled over the strange conversation, a small, ugly seed of doubt began to sprout in my mind. Later that afternoon, Walter woke up. I fed him some more soup, and as his color improved, I felt a wave of relief. The strange encounter at the market started to feel like a weird dream. Maybe Stanley was just having a bad day. Maybe he mistook me for someone else. Trying to make casual conversation, I said, "You won't believe who I ran into at the market today." Stanley Clark. The change was instantaneous. Walter, who had been relaxed and groggy, tensed up. His grip tightened on my hand, and I could tell he was suddenly wide awake, pretending to be sleepy. "Oh yeah," he mumbled into his pillow. "Yeah," I pressed on, watching him closely. He was acting really strange. "Did you know he and Brenda got a divorce?" His body grew even more rigid. It was a subtle shift, but after 20 years of marriage, I knew his every tell. It was clear Walter knew something, but I couldn't figure out what. My gut told me this might be one of those subtle feuds between couples in a small town. Maybe it was linked to Diane, his best friend, whom I didn't particularly like. Diane was a troublemaker, and I hated that Walter was so close to her. I expected Walter to say something like, "Oh, Brenda can't stand Diane," but instead, his face tightened, and he avoided saying much. When he finally spoke, his voice was sharp. "You should stay away from him, Lorraine. I've heard some bad things. I think he might have gone a little crazy after the divorce. He was warning me off. That wasn't like him. A few days later, with Walter feeling better, I returned to work. During my lunch break, I was sitting on a bench outside the library when I saw a man jogging by. It turned out to be Stanley. He stopped when he saw me, looking hesitant. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle. I decided to be direct. "Stanley, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be holding up from." He looked genuinely surprised. "Didn't you get a divorce too?" he asked. "Why would I?" I asked, completely baffled. A look of horror crossed his face. "Never mind," he said quickly. "I've already said too much. I'm sorry, Lorraine. You're a really nice woman. You deserve better." And then he just ran away, leaving me there on the bench, my half-eaten sandwich forgotten in my lap. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. You deserve better. The words echoed in my head. When I got home, I found myself watching Walter more closely, analyzing his every word, his every movement. To clear my head, I went out to the garage to work on my little project, restoring an old wooden rocking chair I'd found at a flea market. I needed to sand it down, to feel the grit under my fingers, to do something physical. About half an hour into my work, I heard the landline ring inside the house. It rang several times before Walter picked it up. If anyone called the landline, it was usually for him. People who wanted to reach me called my cell. It was probably Diane. She called him at least 3 times a day. Driven by a sudden, undeniable impulse, I crept to the door that connected the garage to the kitchen and picked up the extension phone, holding my breath. I pressed the receiver to my ear so tightly it hurt, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was Diane. Of course, it was Diane. But this wasn't their usual chatter about work or local gossip. Their voices were low, urgent. "Where the hell did she run into him?" Diane asked, her voice sharp as glass. "I have no idea," Walter replied, and I could hear the stress in his tone. "But according to the divorce agreement, he's not supposed to talk to anyone about it." My blood ran cold. Divorce agreement? Whose divorce agreement? What are you going to do? Diane pressed. "I'm calling Brenda and telling her to rein in her ex," Walter snapped. "That stupid man already got us kicked out of the club and ruined his own marriage. Now he wants to mess mine up too? Club. Brenda." The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly I couldn't bear to look at it, but I couldn't look away. "So," Diane's voice shifted, becoming sly, suggestive. "Have you thought about my idea for New Year's? Come on, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "I honestly can't manage it, Diane," Walter said, his voice weary. "And to be honest, I'm not sure I'd want to." "You know you're considering it," Diane laughed, a sound that made my stomach turn. "Talk to you later." As they both hung up, I was filled with more rage than I had ever experienced in my life. It was a hot, blinding fury. I threw the sanding block I was holding across the garage. It hit the cinder block wall with a loud crack, bounced back, and knocked several cans of paint thinner off a nearby shelf, sending them clattering to the concrete floor. "Lorraine, honey? Are you all right?" Walter called from somewhere in the house. "Better than ever," I yelled back, and I meant it. In that moment of pure, unadulterated rage, everything became crystal clear. The fog of confusion had lifted, replaced by the harsh, burning light of the truth. "Honey, I'm having trouble getting some of this old paint off," I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm heading out to buy some heavy-duty stripper." I knew he had no idea what that really was, or that I already had plenty. "Isn't it kind of late?" he asked. "The hardware store is open until 9, I said. I grabbed my keys and headed to the driveway. I didn't get into my sensible sedan. I got into my old convertible, a car I hadn't driven in months. I needed the wind in my face. I needed to feel something other than the fire in my chest. I didn't go to the hardware store. I drove straight to my neighbor's house, Arthur and Joyce Green. They lived behind us and often used our driveway. I knew, from town gossip, that they were part of something different. Something they called the lifestyle. When Joyce answered the door, she seemed a little too casual, letting her robe open slightly more than necessary. I asked her to bring Arthur down, sensing this was a conversation for both of them. After we exchanged greetings, I got straight to the point. I explained that I had overheard a conversation between Walter and his friend, which led me to believe my husband might have been involved in their swapping group. Joyce looked at Arthur, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, she sighed. I had a feeling this would come out eventually, she admitted. Lorraine, we weren't to blame. We have rules in place to prevent this kind of thing. According to her, Walter had approached them, saying our marriage needed a spark and that I was fully on board with the idea. He claimed I was too embarrassed to come myself. Joyce explained that Walter first showed up with Brenda Clark, whose husband Stanley had always avoided their group. The partnership between Walter and Brenda seemed reasonable since both allegedly had their spouse's permission. Everything exploded almost a year later when Stanley's lawyer contacted them, threatening to expose their group. Stanley had not given Brenda permission and was divorcing her for infidelity. Walter was also named in the case for contributing to the dissolution of their marriage. The club banned both Walter and Brenda, but the matter was settled quietly. Joyce looked at me with pity. They kept everything quiet to avoid hurting innocent family members. That's why we remained friendly with you, but we've kept our distance from Walter. She then delivered the final blow. Lorraine, recently, Walter and Diane have been hosting parties with various single women. My world didn't just crack. It shattered. I thanked Joyce and Arthur, my voice a hollow echo of its former self. I was seething inside, angrier than I had ever been, but on the surface, I was a frozen lake. I knew what I had to do next. I needed to talk to the one person who understood this specific, gut-wrenching betrayal. I needed to talk to Stanley. Finding his new address wasn't hard in our small town. I called Brenda's sister, Joanne, under the guise of asking about a school issue, knowing she worked at the district office. During the conversation, Joanne mentioned that Stanley was living in an apartment downtown because, in the divorce, that which Brenda got the house and everything else. Armed with the address, I headed to a modest apartment complex where most residents were either students or newcomers. Despite my anger, a wave of empathy washed over me as I walked up the stairs to his third-floor apartment. This was his life now, because of my husband. I knocked on the door. It cracked open, the security chain still latched. He recognized me, but his expression was guarded. Lorraine? What are you doing here? I know, Stanley, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I know everything. About Walter. About Brenda. About the club. He looked like I had physically struck him. After a tense moment, he unlatched the chain and let me in. His apartment was small and sparsely furnished. A single chair, a small TV on a cardboard box, a mattress on the floor. It was the home of a broken man. He tried to apologize, shifting the blame onto Walter, claiming my marriage wasn't ruined and that in time, I'd forget about it. He said his own suffering was proof he was paying for his actions. But his words only made me feel a stronger kinship with him. Forget? I asked, my voice rising. How do you forget that the person you built your entire life with, the father of your children, looked you in the eye every day while he was sleeping with someone else? How do you forget that, Stanley? Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. He just sat there, his head in his hands. What followed was a raw, unfiltered conversation, the kind only two people betrayed by those they loved can truly understand. We talked about the emptiness that never fades, the loss of trust, and the desperate need to do something, anything, to reclaim a piece of ourselves. As I expressed the pain of feeling irreparably broken, something shifted in him. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of steel in his eyes. "He took my house, my savings, my life," Stanley said, his voice quiet but firm. "She took your trust, your future, your peace. They think they got away with it." "They did get away with it," I whispered. "Maybe not," he said, a slow, calculating smile spreading across his face. It was a chilling sight, but it also filled me with a strange, fierce hope. "You know, Lorraine, I got my revenge on Brenda through the divorce. I took most of her money, and she's stuck paying me alimony until I remarry or she retires. But how would you like to get back at Walter?" "I would love that," I replied without hesitation. "But the terms of my own divorce, when it happens, will be complicated. I don't have hard proof." Stanley leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Oh, I think we can get you some proof. We just need a plan." In that small, sad apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of 2 marriages, an unlikely alliance was forged. We were 2 broken people, but together, we were going to build a beautiful machine of vengeance. The next morning, I left the house as if heading to work at the library, but instead, I drove to an electronics store in the next town over. I walked into Spytech, a store that smelled of plastic and paranoia, and felt completely out of my element. I bought a handful of small, high-definition cameras and a discreet recording device for the phone. I felt like a character in a movie, but the cold, hard weight of the equipment in my bag was very, very real. I returned home, telling Walter I'd forgotten some paperwork. My heart pounded as he sat in the living room, reading the paper, completely oblivious. I had him make me a sandwich while I moved through the house with a practice calm I didn't feel, discreetly installing a recording device on the landline and placing tiny cameras in the living room, the den, and our bedroom. Each placement felt like a small act of war. Later that day, acting on Stanley's advice, I set up a meeting with his divorce lawyer. Her name was Ms. Albright, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with eyes that seemed to see right through you. I sat in her plush office, the leather chair feeling cold against my back. "Stanley Clark sent me," I began. She nodded, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "I suspected I might be hearing from you, Mrs. Lorraine. Your husband's name came up quite a bit during Mr. Clark's proceedings." She confirmed she could handle my case and even offered a discount, since much of the legal groundwork was already in place. She assured me that Stanley's divorce records, including Walter's involvement, were part of the public record. This meant I could prove infidelity without much effort, which would have a significant impact on the division of our assets and any potential alimony. The word divorce hung in the air, heavy and final. As I was getting ready to leave, Ms. Albright looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "I noticed the way you were clenching your fists, Mrs. Lorraine. And the look of devastation on your face. I suspect you might want to lash out." I didn't say anything. "Let me offer you some advice, not as your lawyer, but as a woman who has seen this 100 times, she said, leaning forward. "Acting out violently won't solve anything. It could land you in jail. What was taken from you was, in his mind, given freely. Think smart. Not loud." Her words solidified my resolve. My revenge wouldn't be a screaming match in the front yard. It would be cold, calculated, and clinical. It would be a masterpiece. Over the next few days, I monitored the phone recordings. Most of it was mundane chatter. But on December 29th, I finally hit gold. It was Diane, pressuring Walter to attend a party on New Year's Eve. "Walter, you have to find a way to come," she pleaded. "This is going to be special." I got Franklin, Randall, Harold, and Dennis coming. I even got a few new guys from my office to agree to drop by. "Diane, Lorraine is home," Walter protested weakly. "What are we even doing for New Year's Eve?" "She asked me yesterday if I wanted to go to Arthur and Joyce's party." "That would be a disaster. Half the people in their little club still hate me. One of them would probably start flapping their lips and I could lose Lorraine." So don't do anything, she insisted. Just tell her you're sick. We'll find a way. This conversation sparked an idea. The perfect idea. The next day, pretending to go to work again, I began putting my plan into action. I knew exactly who Diane had mentioned, and thanks to Stanley's quiet information gathering, I knew where to find them. My first target was Dennis, a construction worker and a divorced Little League coach. I followed him as he left his apartment, catching him by surprise as he was about to get into his truck. I didn't want a physical confrontation, that was Walter's style. I wanted to use my words as weapons. "Dennis," I said, stepping out from behind a parked car. He jumped, startled. "Lorraine? What are you doing here?" "I think you know," I said, my voice calm and even. "I want to talk about the parties. About Walter. About Brenda. About you." His face went pale. He immediately started stammering, apologizing, making excuses about his divorce and loneliness. "Save it," I said, cutting him off. "You have two options, Dennis. First, I could name you in my divorce. I could drag your name through the mud in this town. Your boss, the mayor's brother, wouldn't like that very much, would he? You'd lose your coaching job, and any respect you have left." His eyes widened in fear. "Or," I continued, "you can do exactly what I say. You keep telling Diane and Walter you'll be at their little party. You give me all the details about when and where it will be. And then, on the day of the event, you steer clear of the trouble I'm about to create. After that, I'll forget everything I know about you. But if you warn anyone, all bets are off." "I'll take option 2, he said, practically tripping over his words. "I'll call you as soon as I hear anything." My next visit was to Harold. I confronted him as he was leaving his office job. He was a quiet, unassuming man who had suffered a heart attack a few years back. He didn't try to fight or make excuses. He just looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "This is about Walter, isn't it?" he sighed. "It is," I confirmed. Harold admitted there was no justification for what he did. He claimed it was just an act, that after his health scare, he'd acted on impulse, feeling vulnerable. He swore he'd never touch another married woman. His remorse seemed genuine, but I couldn't afford to trust it. "Harold, I need you to do the same thing I asked of Dennis," I said, laying out the plan. He looked stunned. "But why? You're going to divorce him, right? This will destroy him." "That's the point," I said coldly. He seemed almost as upset as I was. "Lorraine, he loves you. It was just a fling, for crying out loud. You have kids together. You can't be serious. Is this about your ego? You don't want him anymore just because some other woman slept with him? This will break up a family." "Harold, it's not about ego. It's about trust," I replied, my voice cracking slightly despite myself. "I'll never be able to trust him again. And that trust is the foundation of our family." He broke it. "Not me." He just nodded, sitting there with his head in his hands. He looked up at me, a strange expression on his face. "If you want him that badly," I said with a bitter laugh, "you can have him. I'm out of the picture." He suddenly looked up at me as if I was crazy. "Why the hell would I want a man who cheats?" he asked. We both suddenly burst out laughing, a strange, hysterical sound in the quiet parking lot. After giving Harold his instructions, we parted ways. My final visit was the hardest. It took me to Stanley's apartment. He let me in, and we sat in awkward silence for a moment. I updated him on my progress with Dennis and Harold. He nodded, his face grim. We had the pawns in place. Now, we just needed to set the trap. "So, the party is on," Stanley said, pacing his small living room. "We have the location from Dennis. A cheap motel off the highway. We have the time. And we have the guest list. But how do you guarantee he'll go? I have an idea about that, I said, a cold knot forming in my stomach. He got away with it once before by saying I was too embarrassed. This time, I'm going to be too sick. The plan was simple and deeply, personally painful. I was going to fake the flu. The same flu I had so lovingly nursed him through just a few weeks prior. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. On the morning of New Year's Eve, I began my performance. I started by fainting a fever, holding a hand warmer to my forehead right before walking into the living room where Walter was watching TV. I stumbled, clutching my head. "Honey, are you okay?" he asked, rushing to my side. His concern felt like acid on my skin. "I think I'm coming down with something," I moaned, letting him feel my artificially warm forehead. "I feel awful." By lunchtime, I was fully committed, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, making a show of shivering. I made a weak, rasping phone call to my boss at the library, calling in sick for the next day. All the while, an app on my phone was secretly recording every sound in the house. I captured a call between Walter and Diane, where he excitedly confirmed he was free for the night. I heard him describe his plans in bed for Brenda, which would be very, very useful in my divorce settlement. I heard him set limits on what he would allow with the other women, as if that made him some kind of saint. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. By early evening, I knew it was game on. Walter brought me some flu pills, the same ones that had knocked me out for hours when I was actually sick. He was planning to drug me to make sure I wouldn't wake up. "Here, honey, take these," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "They'll help you sleep through the night." I pretended to take the pills, palming them in my hand while he watched, and then faked a big gulp of water. I monitored the time, knowing how long it took for the real pills to take effect. An hour later, I let my breathing become deep and even, my body going limp. Once I appeared to be sound asleep, he made the call. I heard his hushed, excited voice on the phone with Diane. "She's out cold. I'll be there in 20. He thought he was so clever. As he got ready to leave, he stood over me for a moment. I could feel his presence. I wondered what he was thinking. Was there any guilt? Any remorse? Or was it just the thrill of getting away with it? He lightly kissed my forehead, the same forehead I had heated with a hand warmer, and then he was gone. The moment the front door closed, my eyes snapped open. I sat up, the house silent around me. It was time. I called Stanley. "He's on his way. Are you ready?" "We're ready," he said, his voice steady. "The wives are on standby a few blocks away. Dennis and Harold have confirmed they're not going. It's all set." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a cold, thrilling certainty. The curtain was about to rise on the final act. The engine of my prized Mustang purred as I pulled away from the house. A pang of guilt, small but sharp, pricked at me. Lorraine had looked so pale, so weak on the couch. I was a real jerk for leaving her like that on New Year's Eve. For a fleeting second, I considered turning back. We could just watch TV, like two old people, and I could hold her hand. But then my phone buzzed. It was Diane. "Hurry up! The party's getting started." The guilt evaporated, replaced by a jolt of excitement. It wasn't really cheating, I told myself. It was just variety. A way to spice things up. My marriage to Lorraine was solid. We had a history, kids, a mortgage. This was just a physical thing, a way to blow off steam. It didn't mean anything. In fact, in a weird way, it made me a better husband. After a night like this, I always felt a renewed appreciation for Lorraine, a desperate need for intimacy with her. It was like balancing the scales. The more I gave her, the less the other stuff mattered. I convinced myself that variety had kept our marriage alive. If I didn't have this outlet, who knows? Maybe I'd have grown resentful. Bored. Maybe I would have left her. So really, I was doing this for us. The logic was twisted, I knew, but it was the only way I could live with myself. I pulled into the dingy parking lot of the Starlight Motel. It wasn't exactly a high-class joint, but that was the point. It was anonymous. I saw Randall's beat-up truck and Franklin's sedan. I was late, but the night was young. When I walked in, only Diane was there, dressed in a silk robe and lingerie. The room was pathetic. An ice chest full of cheap beer, a bowl of Doritos on the table. It didn't feel like a party. It's not about the food, Diane said with a wink, reading my mind. This is a sex party. Now go change into something more revealing. I refused. If the women wanted me, they'd have to take me as I was. Diane just laughed. You'll loosen up, big time, once you get a Johnson or two in you. Half an hour later, we were still sitting there. Randall and Franklin finally showed up, looking nervous. Brenda was supposed to arrive early, but she was nowhere to be seen. I started to feel a bit uneasy. Where was everyone? Finally, at 8:30, Brenda walked in. She looked incredible. The sight of her made me forget all about Lorraine. Brenda walked over, lifted my shirt, and kissed my stomach. I missed you, she whispered. The excitement of being with someone new, even someone I'd been with before, always had a significant effect. That's it, I thought. Give it to me. Do it hard, Lorraine. My mind froze. Did I just think Lorraine? Brenda suddenly stopped, a strange look on her face. At that exact moment, the motel room door didn't just open. It flew off its hinges, slamming against the inside wall with a deafening crash. Chaos erupted. Two women charged into the room, screaming at the top of their lungs. One was Randall's wife, a large, furious woman, and the other looked like Franklin's wife, her face a mask of rage. At first, I thought they might be other women Diane had invited, but it quickly became clear who they were. Then two more women stormed in, and the yelling just got louder. The first two yanked Diane off the couch and started kicking and hitting her. She tried to fight back, but it was no use. I lost track of her when the last woman, a woman I didn't recognize, grabbed Brenda away from me and yanked me by my hair. She was my size, but she was furious. She pulled my hair and slammed my head into the wall. I was dazed, seeing stars. Then she landed a huge punch to my face, and my legs went weak. All I wanted to do was fall to the floor, but she kept me on my feet, hitting me again and again. I'm not sure if I blacked out for a moment, but suddenly there were 4 or 5 cops in the room, their flashlights cutting through the dim, chaotic space. They separated us, pulling the screaming women off of us. The room was a wreck, beer spilled, chips crushed into the carpet, a lamp overturned. It smelled of cheap perfume and violence. As they cuffed me, my mind struggled to piece it all together. This wasn't random. The timing was too perfect. The wives all showing up at once. This felt like a setup. We were all taken to the police station. After getting my injuries treated, a split lip, a black eye, and what felt like a cracked rib, I was placed in a cell. Unsurprisingly, I was sharing it with Randall and Franklin. My supposed friend Diane was put in a separate cell with Brenda. Randall's wife had apparently broken his nose. He sat on the bench, moaning, holding a bloody towel to his face. She's gonna take everything, he whimpered. The house, the kids, my pension. Things didn't go as we might have hoped. The district attorney was clever. He charged us with using a private structure for lewd and lascivious behavior in an area not zoned for such activities, a law typically used to target street sex work. It carried a hefty fine or the possibility of 3 years in jail. We faced the judge on Monday morning, and our bail was set at $10,000 each. I tried calling my parents, but they didn't answer. I sat in that cold, sterile cell, the smell of disinfectant burning my nostrils, and the full weight of what I had done crashed down on me. I had gambled with my perfect life, and I had lost everything. The flashing lights of the police car were burned into my memory, the sound of the siren echoing in my ears, drowning out every other thought. I saw my life, my career as a principal, my reputation in this small town, all of it circling the drain. I saw Lorraine's face in my mind, pale and sick on the couch, and for the first time, a wave of genuine, soul-crushing shame washed over me. My plan to have a little fun had failed. But as I sat there, I slowly began to realize this was bigger than that. This wasn't a failed plan. This was a trap. And I had walked right into it. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll understand that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement that cheers me on. Please, comment with the number 1, and listen as I tell you the rest of my story. I spent 2 agonizing days in that holding cell before I was told someone had posted my bail. A surge of relief washed over me. It had to be my parents. Or maybe even Lorraine. Maybe she had woken up, found me gone, and, despite everything, her love for me won out. I was led to the front desk, my mind racing with apologies and excuses I could give her. When I stepped outside into the cold January air, I saw him. Stanley Clark. He was leaning against my car, my beautifully restored 1967 Mustang Fastback, my pride and joy. Stanley? I asked, confused. What are you doing here? Did Lorraine send you? In a way, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes held a look of cold, hard satisfaction. He handed me a thick manila envelope. These aren't official documents, he explained calmly. They're just copies. But the restraining order in there is legitimate and will be enforced. You need to stay 500 feet away from Lorraine's house, her workplace, and her. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lorraine's house? I stammered. It's my house. Not anymore, Stanley said. He then handed me a single car key. It wasn't the key to my Mustang. It was the key to my old, beat-up pickup truck that I kept in the garage for hauling things. All your clothes and personal items are in the back of the truck. There's enough gas to get you to your parents' place. The official divorce papers will be sent there by messenger in 2 days. I stood there, speechless, the envelope heavy in my hand. It was all so ridiculous I should have seen it coming. The strange warnings from Stanley. Lorraine's sudden illness. The perfectly timed police raid. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a symphony of destruction, and my wife was the conductor. So you got your revenge, huh? I shot back at him, my voice dripping with venom. You couldn't get over Brenda, so you decided to sleep with my wife? For the first time, an emotion flickered across Stanley's face. It was pity. I've never slept with Lorraine, Walter, he said, and the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. I've only loved one person in my life, and your new girlfriend ruined that. Lorraine and I aren't in any kind of relationship. He continued, laying out the timeline of my downfall with brutal precision. The information about my divorce didn't come from me. From what I know, Lorraine told you about running into me at the market. Like any good wife, she came home and told you. You got upset and spilled it to your co-conspirator, Diane. Lorraine overheard you. Then she came and found me, and we orchestrated all of this. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Lorraine knows my pain. She understands what it's like to lose someone you love because of their own selfishness. So, knowing that, she offered me a chance at this little bit of revenge. And I took it. He turned and walked away, getting into the driver's side of my Mustang. He started the engine, and the powerful roar that always filled me with pride now sounded like a death knell. My heart shattered as I watched my car, my beautiful car, drive off with the man who had just destroyed me, disappearing into the night. The following year was a blur of humiliation. The divorce was swift and brutal. Thanks to the evidence from the motel and Walter's own recorded confessions, Ms. Albright tore his case to shreds. I was awarded the house, half of our assets, and he was ordered to pay me significant alimony for 2 years. He lost his job as principal, his reputation in tatters. He and Diane both received 6 months in jail and a year of probation. Once he was released, he moved in with his parents, a shadow of the confident man he once was. I set aside all the alimony money in an account for him and gave it to him through his parents once the 2 years were up. I didn't want his money. I just wanted him gone. During that time, Stanley and I remained close. We were, as we told everyone, just 2 friends helping each other heal from bad relationships. We spent a lot of time together, especially on weekends. He'd help me with yard work at my large house, and we'd head to his new, smaller place to fix things up. We often went out for dinner or for long walks. During the winter, we'd stay in and watch movies. Stanley was the kindest, gentlest man I'd ever known. Even my kids, Sarah and Ben, accepted him into our lives, grateful for the stability he brought me. We were just friends, but I noticed a strange, protective feeling growing inside me. It annoyed me when other women flirted with him, or when our time together was interrupted. It had been a year since my divorce and nearly 3 since his. One evening, I told him he was over his divorce and should consider dating one of the many women who were clearly interested in him. The look on his face irritated me, but I knew it was time for both of us to move on. Suddenly, Stanley was in tears, and I was close to breaking down too. The intensity of the moment hit hard. I admitted that maybe I wasn't a good friend after all, unable to support him in this new chapter of his life. He just shook his head, pulling out his iPad. He showed me a picture of the 2 of us, taken at a town picnic a few months earlier. We were laughing, and my head was resting on his shoulder. "This is the person I've been dating, Lorraine," he said softly. "I've been dating you all along. I was just waiting for you to catch up." The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. In that moment, everything changed. His iPad dropped to the floor as he fell into my arms, kissing me passionately. He confessed he'd been waiting for this since our first New Year's Eve spent as friends, over a year ago. That witch, Diane, had a professional knack for throwing parties. So much so that after she got out of jail, she actually started an event planning business. It was ridiculous that a woman who hosted swapping parties was now so well regarded, while my ex-husband became a town pariah. On the next New Year's Eve, Stanley and I went to the town's annual party, held at the same hall as that fateful night years ago. The room was filled with familiar faces. Across the room, I saw him. Walter. He was standing alone, looking lost. Our eyes met for a moment, and I gave him a small, polite nod. Just before midnight, as the new year held all its possibilities for everyone, Stanley did the unthinkable. He got down on one knee. The room held its breath. Time seemed to stop as everyone watched him. He held out a ring, and his eyes, full of love and hope, met mine. "Lorraine," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you turned the worst time in my life into the best thing that ever happened to me. Will you marry me?" In her tiny voice from across the room, my daughter Sarah yelled, "Say yes, Mom." Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I will." They kissed, and the entire room exhaled in a cheer as the clock struck midnight. Joy filled the space. As Stanley slid the ring onto my finger, I looked over his shoulder and saw Walter one last time. He was just standing there, watching the beautiful life I had built from the ashes of the one he had burned down. And then, he turned and walked out of the party, disappearing into the cold night, alone.